Okay, now we're going to look at Mudbox as a possibility to texturize these objects. To start out with, I'll use a polyplane. And the polyplane starts out like this, really small. And I'll make it a little bit bigger. I'll make it as big as these other objects. And since I have Mudbox installed as 2012 and Maya 2012, I can hit this button, File, Send to Mudbox, Send as New Scene. Alright, so very basic stuff. We have Paintbrush and Projection. These are the main two brushes that we'll be looking at. Paintbrush is just that. If I go to start painting on this, it's going to ask me what do I want to start painting on? A new layer? And what kind of layer? Is it going to be a diffuse, a specular, or gloss? What's really nice about this is if I paint gloss here and send it back to Maya, it's going to be glossy in those areas. So I can paint per channel here. Let's go to diffuse. It's the very basic, just color channel. And I can hit OK. We have color and we have stamps. Okay, so stamps already come in with a color. You can augment the color by just adding a color to them. But let's say I wanted to paint, just like this really weird foliage. I can go in and make my brush a little bit bigger by hitting B on the keyboard, click and drag, and very quickly fill this entire area with this moss. Notice the moss has this drop-off value on it. Okay, that's really nice. In the fact that anyone that I have like that automatically starts blending very nicely from one texture to the next. Anytime I have a square, it doesn't have such a nice value of dropping off very quickly to another one. And in some cases, these black and white ones will rely heavily on color. So if I have a color of blue here, it's going to paint that color. But you can see that's very harsh. Now if I was using a green with blue, I would get a dark blue. So anytime you see the color variations, you should probably just use white as a color. That way you get the pure 100% color that came in with the texture that you're using. But what's really nice about this is if I hit B on the keyboard and make a littler brush, like a size 17, I can start painting and it's very small. Now if you remember my Photoshop workflow is, I find the texture on the internet, I make it smaller and higher res, and then when I'm done, I ship it over to Maya and attach it to the mesh at the scale. So in this case, I can choose whatever scale I want. Like that. And go File, Send to Maya, Send Selected to New Scene, or Update Current. I'm going to say Update Current. And there we go. We have this nice texture. I can zoom in on it. It's got pretty good resolution. And over in my textures palette, I have this. This is a really hard texture to find on your hard drive. It's located in C drive, admin, documents, Mudbox. I find that if you right click on it and say edit texture, it brings it right to the surface, and you can save this in Photoshop and augment it there if you wanted to. Alright, good workflow. But how do we get textures in here that we can use? Well, before I answer that question, let's go back to Mudbox and look at a couple other things. Besides stamps and having all these stamps available, we also have stencils. So I'll take stamps, turn it off, and start painting this white. So I'll use B on the keyboard, make my brush bigger, paint this all white, and then choose a different color, like black. Okay, and yeah, that's weird. Hit OK. So now I have black, and I'll undo that. Let's go to stencil. Stencils work a lot like stamps, but stencils can be placed in different areas. Case in point, let's go to this rock. Okay, this rock texture, I can make it bigger and smaller by hitting S on the keyboard. The left mouse button allows me to rotate it. That's something you couldn't do with stamps. Middle mouse button allows you to pan it around, and right mouse allows you to scale it. So I could scale it really small and start painting. But I would have to what? Tile it over and over again in order to get that same effect. Or I can make it really big and add to it. Now this would be a really good way of tinting things if you think about it. So get them to the point you like them, and then if you wanted to add a secondary texture, notice this brick. So if I went to stamp and turn this back to white, and then go to stencil and go to the brick, look at that. So I could really paint brick real time. And now getting it to align absolutely perfect is another story altogether. So there's still the workflow that I showed you before with brick actually stands to be one of the better ones. This one's very hard to get everything lined up, and if you do happen to get it all lined up, there's no saying that it's going to flow from one piece to the next. Still, stamps are very interesting, and if you want to tint something back, these are a great asset. Now, there's fall off. Fall off just occurs when there's, if my outside of my brush has a nice fall off that occurs. Okay, so we'll play around with fall off once we get our own textures in here. I say we take a second, back out, go try to get a texture that makes sense, bring it into stamps, and see if we can mount it down here with a drop off just like this. So wherever I paint, it has a natural drop off. The black indicates opacity. Alright, so meet me back in the next tutorial.